Um, Welcome. I'm Seraphina Halpern. I'll be interviewing you today, and I'm so glad to have you. To start off, I'd love to have you introduce yourself, your name, your pronouns, where you're currently based out of, how you would identify the work you do, and anything else you'd like to share about your background.
Great. My name is Anita Holland. My pronouns are they, them in plurality. Also all, which means any pronoun, and we. I'm based out of Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, the land of the Lenape-Hoking. Before that, Earth. I belong to the Earth, don't we all? I'm an interdisciplinary artist and performer. I'm an advisor, author, facilitator of the healing arts. The work I do is it's rooted in curiosity, celebration of breath as a birthright, playfulness, and luminosity. I don't know, identify. How do I identify? Identity is kind of a curious conversation that's like steeped in colonial structures, and I'm still having to define myself by a box within a box. But if we cannot see all these categories, these boxes, then how are we to break free from them? So with that said, I'm Black, American, mixed, white, Asian, with an unaffiliated Native American lineage. I say Black and American next to one another because, once we get to Africa, the conversation about what I am gets really interesting. I was raised culturally white in the Midwest. I was born in 1982 before the widespread advent of the internet. And I think like what I'm pointing at here is just my like varying levels of privilege and positionality, which I think is important. Again, in order to get free, we have to see where we are and who we are. Also, in terms of identity, I don't know. We're queer, gender full, and I hold all of my ancestry with me, and again, of the earth. Yeah.
That's a lovely answer. Thank you so much. I would also love to hear about some of the work you've been doing recently, whether you want to identify that as pre-shutdown or during the shutdown, or any work that you're looking forward to completing in the near future.
Okay. I've spent a lot of the shutdown. I did online ballroom dancing with students, and that was really fun. We actually got to talk a little bit about settler colonialism with them and how that affects dance and like that seeps into so many things. But upcoming next month, I am doing a piece called The Black Best Friend, where we're unpacking like what it means to have been that in life for folks as people who are like femme presenting and identifying specifically, but also like friends who are like so-and-so's when like you have lots of you have a white friend who's like, you're my best friend. There's just a lot entangled in that. That's one piece. Then the Philadelphia Asian Performing Artists are putting on a festival called Come to Papa in June as well. And for that, I'm leading a workshop called Deprogramming Alienation. So again, for me, a lot of my journey these past, even before, so I would say probably the past like 2.5, 3 years, has just been like really deeply self-reflective. There's been like a major journey which was only like really like lifted up by the pandemic of being like, well, all of the structures that I usually have to like give my time and space and energy to were no longer like able to work. So I actually had to do the inner work that I was like putting off and making excuses for. And some of that comes down to like alienation. How was I an alien to myself? And this workshop like specifically is just getting at like programming in terms of like literally the things that we see that tell like what we see on TV, what we see on social media, what we literally see in the world. There are images and things that are telling us we're being fed information all the time from like several different directions. And so it's just like a light self-reflection. And it's a space that's like open to people of any race or ethnicity. It's more specifically, I think, trained towards people, again, raised in America, because programming is different wherever you go. And also, like, the invitation is for people to, like, notice all the things that come up for themselves, but only to share what is surprising for them. yeah, and even noticing when judgment comes up, and just letting that letting it be there, but not judging it. I also have like a little zine that I'm doing that goes along with that. And other than that, I've been working on meditations, guided meditations, because there aren't enough of those on the internet by people of color. And I really got like deeply pleased by ASMR over the course of the past few months. I really like love how sound can like reflect on the body in certain ways. And I know not everybody is sensitive to it, but I really just like wanted to kind of like mess with that as well. And also, um, kind of been just doing some work where I made myself like a north, made myself a West African medicine wheel, and it's just kind of like getting at the ways in which that also is like parallel to um, Native Indigenous wisdom here in the Americas, and just like getting again closer to like being of the earth is a thing that I've been thinking about a lot. And sometimes there's a lot of shame, and it's like hard to get outside of just being inside of a human body. So I'm also experimenting by being in like other natural bodies. So the first meditation I made is for the West. It's for water, and it's a whale meditation, and it's really cute. So that's one of the things I'm working on. I have a punk band called the Bandits. That's a project of my theater company, Applied Mechanics. We got a rehearsal next week. Maybe we'll get some new songs. It's gonna be really cute. We have a band out on Bandcamp called We Are Bandits. And my theater company, not my theater company, Applied Mechanics, has a 9-episode serial that we are launching the first episode of in June. It's funny, we're a theater company, but we're gonna mix it up. We're gonna do a variety of mediums, culminating with the 9th episode being an in-person uh, spectacle. Who knows? I can't tell you. I can't tell you more about it. But essentially, it's interdisciplinary. No, it's interplanetary encounters of the queer kind, essentially. So like we're gonna find a group of non-human beings on a planet far, far away that is not so completely different from our own planet. Maybe 10,000, maybe 100,000 years from now. It's gonna be fun. Our radio episode comes out May 30th. It's cute. Other orbits. Then aside from that, I don't know. Dramaturgy for friends, and then there's a visual art piece that it's untitled, that surrounds lineage, and also is like celebrating ancestry, celebrating the present, and celebrating the future unknown, that I am having a garment made for. And there will be yeah, we're gonna film some stuff here in spots around Philadelphia that at least to me feel very important and luminous to shine a light on. Who knows how that work will exist? Maybe it will be in tandem with other things. Maybe it will be its own like work by itself. We'll see. So like not much.
Yeah, nothing at all from what I'm hearing.
Yeah, no.
Wow, that's amazing. That's such exciting work. I have a million more questions about it, and where I can find it. But I'm going to get back to that at the end. I have some questions about like how your new work can compare with the work you've done with Shakespeare. But before we get into that, oh yeah,
can I like say
ahead.
one more thing? I forgot to say, I just got trained. I did Reiki 2 and Reiki 3. So in terms of like the healing process and aspect, that's also been like a large part of the journey of the last year and a half. And I think that like helps tie in with things later. So just wanted to put that there. Okay.
Yes, I appreciate that. So to start getting to those later things, just to give us like an idea of the direction you're coming at Shakespeare from, could you talk about your background, like how you got introduced to it, your sort of evolution within Shakespeare over the years?
Yes. I met Shakespeare in high school. We did a production of Romeo and Juliet. I may have come across like some other stuff earlier. I feel like we also saw like the Playboy, or was it the Hustler version of the Scottish play. Also the Baz Luhrmann R&J came out when I was in high school, so that was really affecting. And again, that gets back to how much power these screens have. Let's see. And then other than that, I don't know. I like wasn't super into it until like undergrad at the University of Utah. We had guest artists come from Shakespeare and Company in the Berkshires to teach, and I think their pedagogy and their approach to the text, which really comes back to like breath connection or dropping in, was like super important for me. Yeah, I mean, essentially, like this is a process of like dropping in. So like you sit across the space from like your scene partner, and you're taking them in, and it's a memorization technique, but also like super layered. So like you don't know all of your lines, and you have someone behind you who will tap you on the shoulder and read each line to you, so you'll say it without having to think about what the next words are. So it's just being able to like feel it and have it come from a space that's deeply rooted in your breath and to the person across the space. Um, that was like really luminous is my word for the day. And I really like that a lot. And then also over time, it's the wordplay that really gets me. I love a good pun. Um, and also sitting around the table and like talking about the layers of meaning that like exist inherently like in the text is super interesting, but then also like noting that as time continues to pass and these productions are done over and over again, but also the world continues to change, also those are new layers that are added to it. So yeah, yeah, those are my thoughts.
Yeah, that was amazing. I I would love to hear how you think like sort of your background in Shakespeare and this idea of Shakespeare as like something that is very old but we are experiencing today and that is still evolving today versus this new work you're creating, um, which is like so to me it seems very rooted in the present moment. Sort of how do those two compare? Are there things that you can do with one that you can't with the other, or do you see less of a division between the two?
I think I see less of a division between the two, only because specifically with like applied mechanics, like our work definitely like we definitely like look at history when we're making a thing and also like ask a lot of questions, and so like Shakespeare is filled with all that history. But I don't know. I think like to me, theater and art in general, when uncoupled from the settler colonialist institutional structures and the entertainment industrial complex, I feel are exercises in expression that I personally believe are acts or a vehicle or act as a vehicle of healing or desire or literal inspiration. Um, Theater can ask questions and leave space for people to ponder the answers. Um, yeah, but I feel like applied mechanics. Yeah, we do. No, I think I said that already. I don't need to repeat myself.
No, that was a great answer. Thank you so much. I think next, like continuing with this idea of like how do we interact with Shakespeare today,
Mm-hmm.
I would love to ask like how you see your experience as a person, to try to avoid any like leaning into this idea that like you have a specific identity that needs to interact with this in a specific way, but sort of how that interacts with Shakespeare. Specifically, one thing you might like sort of want to compare to or consider would be Keith Hamilton Cobb's piece American More, where he talks about his experience as a Black man, and the struggle he faced in Shakespeare, where he was very interested in Shakespeare, loved it, and everyone just wanted him to be Othello, and also didn't want to ever hear his opinion on Othello. Is that something that resonates for you?
um, yes, my experience is different, but yes, my experience is more of like always the bridesmaid, never the bride. Uh, so I've done like a variety of characters, but I'm still relegated to a certain space. So it's like I've been Ross, I've been Chorus, I've been Queen Margaret, I've been a soldier, Casca, Regan, Ladies Montague, Capulet, and Lord Capulet, and then almost Oberon and Hippolyta, and that's a whole other thing. But essentially, and then I think at some point during the past year and a half, I was asked to do like a reading of Cymbeline, but again, it was a character. I can't remember her name. Um, that essentially again is like a naysayer, like is supposed to be like powerful, but like still like stuck within like the structures of patriarchy. And I was like, you know what? That's just not a role that I want to play right now. I don't want to get in that headspace. No, thank you. I know that headspace. So it's just like it's usually like a lesser than a lead, the naysayer, the mother, the crone, or a vessel of pain, or an arrogant man. And I'm like, well, there are other roles. mm-hmm.
Do you feel like within that limited range of roles you've been given, you've been able to like work with them and explore them? Like, what does it mean to you to play these like, you know, negative Nancys in Shakespeare's canon?
I mean, I think it took me a while to be like, I think I always had fun, like again, playing with the words in the text. In general, when I'm in shows, when I'm not the lead, which is a space I'm very used to, I've gotten to a certain point where I'm like, what is it that's needed in this scene? There's what the there is what the director wants. There's what like the lead needs. And so I've just gotten to a point of like, ooh, what's the game of like giving these people what they need? Give the people what they need. And so like that was like a fun game for a very long time. And kind of like exciting. And then like, you know, just making different choices. But I think that like cycles back to my own experience of eventually needing to direct my own life outside of the theater.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And definitely like reminds me of some of Cobb's work in American War, where he talks about like Shakespeare as this place that was a great opportunity to connect with people, but also really asked him to like listen to what the straight white male director wanted from the piece and just try to appease him if he wanted the role.
Mhm. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that I think I have that reserved more of that. My own opinion on that comes up on a later question. But I mean, you're right. It is about appeasing that person, and it's a thing that I didn't. So like for many years, for a while, I was like, yeah, this is fine. This is fun. It's harder to see in a silo of like one play and then another play, and so like if you're like looking at the breadth of work, it's like, oh, that's where I'm relegated to. But when you're doing reps, I think that's where it becomes much more glaringly obvious. Um, the issues, because a lot of times, you know, like color blindness is not a word that needs to exist in the lexicon anymore. It needs to be color conscious, or else what are we doing here? But yeah, you know, most of the places that I've done, most of the directors have been white. Most of the artistic directors are also white. Most of the rooms, the other actors in the room are white. Most of the audiences are also white. So it's just like, for me, for my experience specifically, again, being raised culturally white in the Midwest, I grew up understanding that as the norm. So it took a while for me to understand the weight that I needed to take off of my own personal shoulders. And I had an experience with a company like in about around Juneteenth of last year, that really like kind of just illuminated many things for me. It was a learning experience, and I was like, oh yeah, I don't have to do that. I don't. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't. I'm glad you were able to have that experience and really see that.
Mm-hmm.
I guess to keep moving on to these later questions, because I'm very excited to hear your opinion. So I know we already touched a little bit on this idea of like how your own like experience, not like how it diverges from Keith Hamilton Cobb. I just want to give you a minute if you'd like to speak any more to that, specifically like him being like cis Black man versus your own experience?
Um, so for a while, yeah, for the longest time I've identified as like mixed Black femme, and then like I'm trying to like open up outside of those boxes. Well, no, I am. It's not trying. There's just more. There's just more to it. I have been fortunate that like because I have done drag for many years, and so like I've found myself in a lot of queer circles. So in terms of like gender expression, I've been able to like flex in many different directions. So like that's been cute. I mean, but I think that there are still like those purists out there that think that like women can't play both roles in Shakespeare, and I'm like over it. um, yeah.
Yeah, I think over it is a great way to respond to that. And that is a great segue into our next question, which sort of compares like how some people, specifically like one thing we looked at in this course was like Deborah Ann Bird's Becoming a Fellow, where they talk about like the opportunity to play men in Shakespeare's canon as very liberating, specifically Othello, to get to like expand into that space and really explore themselves and their own identity. And comparing that with Ayanna Thompson's view of Othello, which is that because of its embedded racism within the text, as well as like the system of bigotry that produces it, there's no way to ask like Black actors to perform certain Shakespeare pieces, or like actors of any minority to perform certain pieces without exposing them to the traumatic experience of needing to interact with these systems of inequality and then play these racist caricatures within it.
Yeah. I mean, it's true for like most of the canon. I think in the space that I was working in last year, I've always wanted to be Titania, but I got cast as Oberon, and I was like, well, that's halfway there. And in that process, I was like, the misogyny. It's not even just misogyny. It's I mean, he drugs his wife, steals a child. Like, there's so much that he does to like get away with it. I was like, this is actually a really terrible father figure. And then I was like, and I'm playing this in a role as a female, and it was just like, it was becoming hard for me to like. Usually, I can like find love for somebody, but I'm like, oh. The deeper I got into that, I was like, this guy, no. It's just like so upsetting because and this gets back to programming because again, love a good movie, but also like Midsummer is so beloved and like so fun and funny, but it's also so problematic. But yeah, in terms of like the weight that, and that's one space where I was like, usually I'm able to like find like empathy and like really like get into the character's headspace. And I was like, I just couldn't do it. I tried really hard. But I think the other part was like that was in a rep where I was also playing other characters. And again, I just had no space to there was no space for joy. And I think that like that was highlighted even more so because these rehearsals were happening again in the midst of the uprising, and also like coming up to Juneteenth. So like in this play, I was like playing the big bad dad, and then opposite that, I was supposed to play Hippolyta. So I'm like also enslaved, the captive. And then in another play, I was playing a variety of like soldiers and like traitors and jailers. And then in another play, I was like essentially like the quote unquote, like, you know, hero, heroine, but of course, who gets strangled at the end. I'm like, well, it took me a second to like unpack why that felt uncomfortable and had the pandemic not happened, I would have performed those plays and probably still would be unpacking like why I was like felt why something felt off. But because of the pandemic, I had enough time and space away to look at it from that distance and see how I had been placed. And the fact that as a Black person working with a classical repertory theater company that like prides itself on, uh, looking at systems of oppression, but like never having had a conversation in the room about race and how I was cast and the other Black people in the room were cast, which again, I like took a step back and was like, oh, this is actually a problem. We should have actually like talked about this, like should have had a substantive conversation about race in the same way that we had a substantive conversation and facilitated exercises around intimacy. And so like that conversation was something that I had to ask for in the room. And it, again, this is all that learning experience. Sorry, emotions. That was a space. I don't really like want to nag on any of it. It just like taught me that I think it was the first time that I like stood up for myself and my people in a way that I had not before. Because again, similar to Cobb's story, gonna get that job, right? But I kept pushing at it. I kept like asking questions and like being present in the room because it shouldn't have to be that way. Like the feelings are valid, and also like I think that like again, this is very circular, but cycling back to like being in a majority rooms that are majority white with audiences that are majority white, like there's a weight, there's a labor that's being done, and it's hard to like do a case study to like measure the impact that has, but I would say that it does take its toll. And having no advocacy, I mean, sure, there are like some old heads who are like, well, there's just the things that you do to like make sure that's fine for you and get by, and that's great. Have those boundaries, or also like walk away. But like, why do you have to have those boundaries built? Because the system doesn't allow for anything else, I think. So it's just like knowing that, knowing that going in is helpful, and that's something that I didn't know going in based on the programming that I was raised with. And that's fine. I've learned. I'm alive.
Yeah. That's very powerful. I would love to hear, if you'd like to share about how that questioning and conversation process went in this specific production, I would love to hear about it. But I would also love to hear like how you think it could go, or how you would want it to go.
I don't know. That process, again, I kindly held space in that room. I asked for facilitation. We didn't get that. So I had to like pseudo facilitate it in a week of like reading through the plays, and like each time there was like enough space to like talk and ask a question, I did. And then eventually there came an admitted instance of consciously racist casting after 3 days of like holding space. And then I was like, well, this is why we should have had this conversation ages ago. And I had worked at this space before, and I think that I had like taken for granted things that I'd like questioned earlier. It just has to be, it's very careful. Language, funny. Language is very important. And having like well-defined definitions of, having well-defined definitions and community agreements in spaces are super helpful, um, because if one person has a definition of how a thing is and not all of it is like a known amongst the group, then there's definitely many opportunities for hurt unnecessarily. So, but yeah, advocacy.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. On a slightly more positive note, I hope, I would love to hear why you wanted to play Titania, what that role meant to you, and other roles that you hope someday to take on, if there are any.
I don't know. I mean, why Titania? She's the Earth Mother, right? Unfortunately, that also is a trope that I fall into, but why hasn't anybody given me the opportunity to take it? Because she's the queen. So it's interesting. Yeah. That being said, I don't know if like I actually want to do like much more Shakespeare in general. For the most part, I'm like not interested. Based on like that experience in general turned me off, but I was also like starting to have issues with theater in general. But like for me, like in terms of Shakespeare, I think the canon is rife with bigotry, and there's just like, you know, if you don't have mechanisms for your artists and also for your audiences to have frank conversations about like the troublesome content and themes, and like if you're not partnering with programs that are working to combat like these themes in the world, then like what are we doing in theater besides like normalizing these behaviors? It's just it's a lot. I'm bored. I think Shakespeare is like at this point right now, sure it might change, but I feel like I hold Shakespeare in the same vein that I hold Dr. Seuss. So I'm really thankful for their wordplay. And I'm glad that like that exists as a thing for me to like look at and be like, ooh, I can do that too. Or like I hope that other people can see like, ooh, that's fun. I want to do my own version. And I just want to see where it's like reflective of like the pleasure of wordplay and telling different stories.
Yeah,
I want to see.
No, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No.
I just want to see. I want to see Shakespeare if it's going to be done at all. If someone were to talk me into it, it would probably have to be a BIPOC femme queer perspective, or else like honestly, I don't know if it's like worth it. At this point, I know what every other version looks like.
Yes, that makes a lot of sense to me, and I think is very well put. We are unfortunately a little bit running out of time.
Oh my gosh, I talked so much.
Oh no, I appreciated it. I just want to make sure you have a couple minutes here in case there is anything you'd like to go back to, any answers you want to expand on, or anything else you'd like to close with.
I don't know. I think hopes for the future. For me personally, in terms of like theater, I've been working to like divorce myself from it in a way, because I had, for some reason, married myself to my work. That's another adage that doesn't, ugh. You're married to your work. It's great. But actually, no, because there are certain things that I'm never going to get out of theater as a relationship. And so that experience last year, like, really helped like solidify what I had not been able to articulate for myself. Personally, for my own future, or at least regional theater. If I'm going to be performing, it's on my own terms, which for me means like I'm excited and it's something that like I desire, or I'm also getting paid well. And then like I'm also in the same vein, theater. I'm also interested in like writing and directing, and dramaturgy. So we'll see. We'll see. I'm exploring those things. But in terms of like theater as a whole, what do I hope for it? I think that I hope that we get out of the black box and into communities. I hope that we have education in house and with our audiences. I hope that there's equity across the board, um, in terms of like advocacy, representation, and compensation, because like so many people made more money on unemployment than they did before the pandemic, working however many jobs that they had to. So like that's a whole thing that like this gets us outside of this silo of theater that like obviously needs to be talked about. But yeah. I don't know. Change is good. I don't know why people are so scared of change. It's like a natural law of the universe. That that's all I got.
Yeah, and what you have got is amazing. I want to thank you again and a million times for your time today, but especially for your honesty and vulnerability. This has been lovely, and I'm going to stop the recording now.